welcome. I'm Vince. Today we're going to talk about a book that I think you should know about called Everything Belongs by Richard Rohr, The Gift of Contemplative Prayer. This is I would say this is probably one of Rohr's more confusing books. I'm not going to lie, I read it before, and the first time I read it, I thought, oh man, he's saying some very wise things here, and I underlined a bunch of stuff, but I really didn't get what he was saying, what the whole thesis was. And so what I wanted to do is I want to make this video and kind of iron out some things. I like things in like a clear, logical order, and he's really all over the place. So here's what I wrote down as a summary. He's saying, God is a God of unity and love for everything and everyone. Our natural state is to be in God and know God, and thus ultimate love and unity with everyone and everything. As we grow up, we create our egos by looking and comparing ourselves to the systems of the world and others. Because of this, our developed egos are based on divisions, false dichotomy, and opposition. We come to believe that this is our true identity, and most people spend most, if not all, of their lives here. We can only reunite with God when we shed our ego of division and accept our true nature of unity. This movement towards God is what Rohr calls contemplative thinking or prayer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of break down each one of those sentences and see what he has to say about those. The first sentence says, God is a God of unity and love for everything and everyone. And our natural state is to be in God and to know God. On my illustration here, I drew a circle that says our inner self, or seen, or he calls these people centered, that live in this perfect state. Or he even calls it the metaphorical garden, which a lot of us can identify with, this perfect unity with God. In fact, he says, at this point in our lives, when we're first born, we don't even have an identity. We are identified by looking at God. And as an example, he says, most psychologists don't even see infants anymore. What they say is there's not an infant, there's an infant-mother relationship. Because the infant has no idea that it's even there. It just knows and returns its mother's gaze. And so that's how he says we are with God. We just know and return God's gaze. So if God is everything and everyone, and God is in love with everything and everyone, then we are everything and everyone. And by the way, this is where he gets the title of his book, Everything Belongs. And I want to clarify something here, because this is, I think, where most people miss it. Most summaries I read or most YouTube videos I see or something like that misinterpret this. That what Rohr is saying is not everything belongs, like everything is necessary or everything is there for a reason. Well, everything happens for a reason. That's not what Rohr is saying. What Rohr is saying is that everything is useful in helping us uncover who God is. So it's not that everything is meaningful, it's that we can make everything meaningful as we create meaning through things, as we discover who God is. Okay, so the next sentence, as we grow up, we create our egos by looking and comparing ourselves to the systems of the world and others. Because of this, our developed egos are based on divisions, false dichotomies, and opposition. And so what we do is when we're born and we're in this perfect state, but then we start looking around and we start identifying who we are based on what we see. And so therefore we look at somebody else and we can say, oh, this is my mother. You are not my mother. Okay, these are my parents. You are not my parents. And then as we grow up even more, we can look around and say, I am of one ethnicity. My skin color is one thing. Your skin color is another. And then we identify even more with groups. We say, oh, I am American and you are not American. Or I am male and you are female. So we create all these divisions, and we can see right away that's going to be a problem, because if God is unity with everything and we are automatically creating divisions, well, that means we're getting further and further from this perfect state. And so I drew in my illustration here a little arrow going out from it that says, develop ego by comparison and fear. And I'll get to that fear part in just a moment. Well, here's that moment. So the next sentence is, we come to believe that this is our true identity, and most people spend most, if not all, of their lives here. So I drew a little circle around my inner circle, and this is where the ego is. This is where you develop that shallow illusion of who you are. It's groupish. You find your own group. You divide yourself from others. I put that we have fear of the outsider. And the reason why is because we develop our group. Oh, I am American and you are not. And so therefore we start to say, well, they have funny ways over there. And we start to, that's how one of the ways we build cohesion in our group is we talk about this other group. And we just kind of fear that group is somehow going to infiltrate ours, or that we're going to somehow like start identifying with them. And that's something we absolutely can't have. And so that's the division we have, and that's the fear that we have of that other group. You might think of this also with sexuality. I am heterosexual and you are homosexual, and you have this funny little homosexual thing going on, and I don't understand it, and so therefore I have this fear of it, that somehow when you're around me, your homosexual vibes are going to rub off, or that I'm going to somehow maybe identify with you, and I just can't have that. And so that's where the fear comes in. And because of that fear, he also says we don't take risks. So we are in our group, and we're very scared of getting kicked out of our group because that's who we identify with. That's our ego, right? And so therefore, if we let somebody else in or start being polite to somebody else without our group's okay, well, then we maybe get kicked out. We may be the ones who are now on the outside. And so that creates a lot of fear in us, and we don't take risks because of that. So a classic thing you might think of is when the Mexican immigrants were coming over, and before they could figure out what to do with them, they were putting them in these cages on the border, and so it sparked this big debate. Well, who did it? Is it the Republican policy that's putting them in cages, or well, they're really just going off some kind of Democrat policy? And so now there's a fight in America of who's to blame for children in cages, right? But what really doesn't happen is that we care about the children in cages, because again, we've identified as we are America, and all this topic really did was to help us make fights within America. But what needs to occur is everybody needs to realize, hey, let's fix this problem first, and then maybe we can have these arguments, right? But that division is so embedded in us. That is our ego. We can only reunite with God when we shed our ego and accept our true nature. I drew two arrows here, point to the center. They're both called seeing the illusion. So we have to see the illusion. We have to realize that it's a false ego and get back to our true nature. And there's two ways that we do this. One of them is through suffering. Suffering is like the fast track almost, because it has a way of getting us there a lot quicker. And the other one he calls gradual awakening, where we go through these little bitty gradual processes where we awake. And you might even think of that as gradual suffering, like we have these little bitty suffering moments where we overcome our ego and make our way to the center. And so both of them start off in the same way. I wrote jarring us awake. We have to be jarred awake. Somehow we have to see something. We have to look around and go, oh my gosh. And so this can happen through suffering. I mean, when you lose someone you love, or you get a divorce, or something really bad happens in your life, and it has a way of jarring you awake to where you go, none of this really matters. I really thought that it did, but it doesn't. This is not who I am, and our divisions don't really matter anymore. The other way is like gradual awakening, and this can just be done through like really small things. For one, you could go to and visit a different culture, and all of a sudden you start saying, oh, wait a second, I used to be so against you people, and now I realize that you people are one of me. And so you grab hold of that and say, maybe we are united. Or you have this thing where you say, oh my gosh, he's such a bigot. And then you realize the thing you did earlier where you hated on somebody who was not in your group. And you make the connection and say, wait a second, are we doing the same thing here? Now, there's a problem with both these paths. And the problem is that we don't take hold of that suffering. We don't take hold of that jarring awake. We don't take hold of that moment and look at our reality. What we do most of the time is that we just dismiss it. Are we really the same person? No, they hate the person that I like. I just hate the people that I don't like. So that's very egocentric. Or we don't learn from the suffering is what he says a lot. We don't take hold of the suffering. For instance, we just, in the divorce, you just go find a new spouse, or you take some pills or something to relieve the suffering when you lose a loved one. We just say, can I just sleep through all of it, right? And what we need to do is we need to take hold of that and learn from that, and then that helps us to identify with others. And this movement toward God is what Rohr calls contemplative thinking or prayer. Remember, everything is already all around us. right? So we're born into this. God is in everything. It's just that we've developed this illusion to where we can't see it. And so what we don't really need to get anywhere. What we need to do is we need to shed all the illusions around us so that we can see God in everything and everyone. He says, meaning is not created, it's discovered. So meaning is already there, we just don't see it. We don't see that everything belongs. He says we don't think our way into new ways of living, we live our way into new ways of thinking. Prayer is not just, folding your hands and praying. Prayer is this living of life where you live through the lessons, live the lessons of suffering, live the lessons of the gradual awakening, so that you live in this this tension where your ego being destroyed or taken apart or dismantled, so that you're moving back to this perfect state. One last thing I want to say is that what he's not doing is he's not saying get out of the world. In fact, he's saying kind of the opposite. He's saying God is in the world. God is all around us. We just need to learn how to see God. And that's what this book is all about. All right, I hope that helped you out a whole bunch. In my next video, I want to talk about two more topics that he mentions, and one of them is suffering, and one of them is also Christianity. So I didn't talk much about Christianity in this video, and that's because Rohr is really a different type of Christian than we might think of, and I think he would say a different type of Christian than most Christians today. And so really, to get the lesson out of this book, I don't think you need to see it through Christian eyes, but Rohr does have an awful lot to say about how Christianity contributes to this, and I'll deal with that in my next video. If you like this one, if you thought it helped, give it a thumbs up. Hey, even if you thought it was terrible, but you think it'll help somebody else, give it a thumbs up and share it with that person. See you later.